Really appreciate you having me. I'm a very grateful speaker today, talking about mindful eating from a dialectical perspective. Please let me know if you can't hear me. Apparently there's not a microphone, so I'll try and shout. So to start with just a little bit of background, this program and the book that is a result of it really started about 20 years ago. And at the time, I was actually in my own eating disorder treatment. And I was 15, and that went on for about 2 years. And quite frankly, it wasn't very effective. And I didn't find it very helpful at all. And after about 2 years of this, my weight was pretty stable, but still underweight. And my doctor told me, I don't think I can do much more to help you, and so I'm going to let you go, and good luck. And so at that point, I had to really figure out how to heal myself. And so very quickly into that process, I decided that I didn't want to just figure out how to help myself, but I also wanted to help other people. And so I decided I was going to go to graduate school and focus on treatment research and really study what can help eating disorders. So I did, and I gained a really solid foundation in behaviorism, and my first client was actually what brought me to DBT. I was talking about that just briefly over lunch today, but she was self-harming. She also had bulimic symptoms, and so we started out with traditional CBT, and that helped the bulimic symptoms a little bit, but it really wasn't touching the self-harm. She was still engaging in binging and purging, and so at the time, my training clinic was developing DBT. So my supervisor said, you should really check out this DBT thing. And I didn't want to, actually, to be honest. I'd done one workshop on DBT, and I walked away from that saying I will never do DBT, ever. They had a little singing bowl. You guys know what that is. So basically a little instrument around the east. And when you're doing mindfulness and DBT, you ring it 3 times to start mindfulness practice. You ring it once. You just stop. What is this? I don't know what this is. Now, mind you, I was moving from the Midwest to Ohio and was going to graduate school in Missouri. But, I thought about it and ultimately decided to join the DBT to be at the training clinic because ultimately I wanted to help my client. And so, in that training process, I really learned DBT inside and out because as a DBT therapist, you have to learn it for yourself and apply it in your life so you can teach it to your client. Because it's not about being an expert and disseminating knowledge to clients. It's about collaboratively figuring out how to move forward in this human journey. So I learned very quickly that DBT could help and change your life, basically. And I saw this with my client. She stopped self-harming, she stopped suicidality, and moved on to a beautiful life. So, and also through this process, I found myself at a conference on eating disorders, the International Conference on Eating Disorders, in a workshop that Lucy was giving. She is one of the main psychologists for DBT for eating disorders. And sitting in that room, I literally almost started crying because I was thinking, gosh, these people get it. This is what we need to be doing with eating disorders. And so it was at that point that I decided I was going to adapt DBT further, specifically for eating disorders and research that further. And so I did. I'll talk about some of the results from that. And along this path, personally, early on in graduate school and undergrad, I had started binging. And at some point in that process, I had the thought that I actually needed to mindfully approach all of the foods that I was trying to avoid. So what was happening was for years I had been avoiding certain things like sweets, junk food, quote unquote. And so then ultimately I ended up binging on that. And so there was this back and forth that was happening. And so actually that fit really nicely with my training in behaviorism because we talk a lot about grading exposure and approaching the very things you're afraid of. And so what I added on to what folks are already doing in DBT for eating disorders was what's called forbidden food therapy, where we literally approach these forbidden foods and very gradually eat them until there's no more distress around them and they have less power. So that was kind of how those two areas came together. start using it immediately for yourself as well as your clients. So who is this for? Of course, I'm biased. I think everybody can benefit from mindful eating, dialectical perspective. But most research is on binge eating disorder and bulimia. And so that's typically who we're thinking about when we're looking at this approach. And at the same time, certainly there is some preliminary evidence for using it with restricted eating per se that has being helpful. You're probably just going to be looking at a more extended course, working through the forbidden foods that usually folks who are on that restrictive end of the spectrum are going to have a lot more pervasive, rigid ideas about food and a lot more forbidden foods that they're going to have to work through. You also want to consider medical issues. So you really want somebody to be relatively weight stable at the time that they're doing this program. So you want to be monitoring their medical status, and if that changes, if there's any sort of life-threatening situations, then you need to go back to some other approaches, get them more stable, and then bring them back. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is about being in the present moment in a non-judgmental way. And with this, we're just being aware of what is. So this can be what's happening outside of ourselves. It can also be what's happening inside of ourselves. So external and internal. So externally, we can use our five senses to notice what's going on around us. So if I look around this room, I might be observing the color blue. I might notice the sound of some sort of air conditioning system working. I might notice the feel of my shoes. The sound of someone talking. The smell of lunch, the taste of my Listerine spray, and the aftertaste of lunch. Right? So all these things I can be aware of and just notice. And then internally, we can be aware of thoughts, feelings, urges, and bodily sensations. So I might be aware of the thought, I wonder what everybody's thinking. A feeling of slight anxiety, an urge to reach for my water, bodily sensation of my stomach digesting my lunch. Right? So you can be aware of all of these things and just notice them without judging. So a really key part of this is, and we'll talk more about this, but just sticking to the facts and looking at what is the reality of what's happening. So not categorizing food as good or bad, as healthy or unhealthy, and also not creating rules about what you should and shouldn't eat. So anytime we're categorizing food or anything in a way that's evaluating it, we are making a judgment. And so it is judgment to say that food is healthy or unhealthy. Would you guys agree with me on that? Yeah? Anybody want to just...
Well, some food is just problematic. You know, that like once you have, for example, a carbohydrate, I don't know, it tends to make me hungry. Or sugar. It doesn't generally, sometimes I'll have it with a salad.
So people bring this up. And there's kind of, you know, the idea of maybe more of an addiction perspective. Somehow trying to cut out foods that cause this triggering. And this idea that, oh gosh, well, if I have one cupcake, then suddenly I want more cupcakes, right? So I need to not have cupcakes. So it is actually the opposite perspective. You're just saying, perhaps the reason that it's so triggering is because you have this idea that, you know, okay, I think if I have one cupcake, then I'm going to want more. And maybe you notice something happening and you interpret it in that way. And so you try to do your best to avoid it. Right? But what happens? Inevitably, we're human. You're probably going to have a bite of a cupcake sometime. And so, you know, that sets you up to have that backfire. Because then you've just violated the rule. Well, I shouldn't eat cupcakes. I shouldn't have sugar. I shouldn't have carbs. Well, I just had some, so screw it. I might as well have a whole bunch. Right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in our mind that can set us up for that. And as far as this idea of healthy and unhealthy, I mean, certainly we had a lot of different foods for lunch, right? So a cupcake is not the same as a piece of lettuce, right? But in and of itself, one bite of a cupcake is not inherently unhealthy, and one bite of lettuce is not healthy. You know, it really depends on the context of the situation. about, for example, somebody who's really, really emaciated, maybe they have cancer, and they can't keep weight on. For them, perhaps any sort of food that, generally speaking, people might say is unhealthy, like, I don't know, fettuccine Alfredo and cheesecake, right? Maybe for them that's healthy, because that's going to help them keep on weight. That's going to help them survive, right? So the idea is everything's relative, and all of these rules and ideas are but it's such a part of our culture and so many messages that we get. So it makes sense to have these ideas in place, but the goal is to become flexible with them. So. And it's interesting, when I tell this to clients, sometimes there is a really strong pushback. Like some foods are just inherently unhealthy. So we have to work on that. So, with this, this is not just mindful eating, it's mindful eating from the dialectical perspective. So what does that mean? A dialectic is any time you have two opposing viewpoints, two opposing sides, and we're trying to find the middle ground and the integration and the middle path. So, with this, we have, again, the idea of internal and external. So, if you are mindfully noticing your food, and just fully focusing on the food in front of you, that's one end of the spectrum, right? So when you were eating lunch today, were you noticing what your food looked like, smelled like, tasted like, felt like? Or if you picked up your cupcake, how did it feel? Even sounded like? Were some things crunchy or some things soft? And were you aware of the inside of yourself? What was happening inside? How were you feeling? What were you thinking? Also, were you engaging with your table mates when you're talking? So with mindful eating from a dialectical perspective, you're balancing all of that and you're honoring what's going on inside. Because sometimes, especially if you've avoided certain foods for very long time, there's going to bring up a lot of anxiety, fear, and even terror when you're approaching these things. And so with this perspective, it's completely okay and effective to be using the stress tolerance and actually perhaps sometimes not fully being aware of the food in front of you. So, if you're eating and you start getting overwhelmed, like moving into panic, then, do something to distract. Maybe turn on the TV and watch it while you're eating. And most of the time, we want to just be eating when we're eating. So does that make sense? Kind of balancing those two needs. And ultimately, the goal is to make our life mindful, because a lot of what's driving how we eat is emotion. And that emotion is coming from somewhere. So, if we figure out what that emotion is trying to tell us, then we'll probably be in a more balanced way. So, it's about choosing where we want to kind of rather than control thoughts in our head that are even reality. So, I mentioned behaviorism, and this is really where this perspective comes from originally, in terms of the forbidden foods hierarchy. So, anyone heard of Baby Albert? Yes. Okay. I think some had not. So it's fun. You can Google him and find fun pictures like this. So I'll just review for those of you who already know this and summarize for those who so basically, back in the 1920s, psychologists were very curious about how phobias felt. This is the beginning of behaviorism, and we didn't really quite know how these things happen. And so what they did is they took this little baby and they presented these white furry objects to him that are not inherently dangerous, they're not threatening. And what they did is every time they presented them, they presented a loud clanging noise. And so a loud clanging noise is going to elicit a natural startle response. But if you just present these white furry objects by themselves, it doesn't, because they're not inherently threatening. But by pairing these white furry objects with a loud clanging noise, he started startling when they would present the objects. And over time, we learned that, oh my gosh, these white furry objects are terrifying, right? So they would present like a little lab rat, they would present Santa Claus's beard, this picture here. And he learned to be afraid of these things. And so what we would need to do with Baby Albert to get him past this phobia is to decondition him. So we would have to go back and present these white furry objects without the loud noise. So he could learn again, you know what, actually these objects are completely safe and I don't need to be afraid of them. there's this idea of graded exposure versus flooding. So with graded exposure, we would be reintroducing these objects gradually, and with flooding, we just kind of throw people in the deep end and don't let them escape until they are done freaking out. So with baby Albert, graded exposure might be first, let's think about white furry objects. Let's think about that lab rat. Let's think about compounds. And then maybe you have him read about white furry objects. And then maybe you present one compound and you present a couple. And then eventually, you're having him interact with the lab rat. Versus splitting, you would just put him in a room maybe with all these white furry objects and not let him get out until he calms down. So most people prefer graded exposure because you're less likely to escape, and then you can actually create new learning. So you can gradually build up confidence that you can approach these things. Whereas with flooding, a lot of times people just escape and then they reinforce the phobia. So the idea with mindful eating from the dialectical perspective and preventative therapy is that for many, many reasons, people basically are reacting to food as if it's this terrifying thing, when the reality is it's meant to nourish us and sustain life. So very gradually approach the very things you think we shouldn't be eating, so you can learn that it's not a big deal. You can have a bite of this and it's fine, right? And then actually, paradoxically, you can eat in a more balanced way rather than going between the restricted and limiting. So then, from baby Albert and behaviorism, we also started looking at, well, how are you thinking? So the idea was, baby Albert's seeing these white furry objects, and then he has a thought, oh my gosh, those are scary, and then he freaks out. So cognitive therapy and theory brings in what's going through your head, and can we change those thoughts because they're maybe not very accurate. And then with third wave behaviors and CBT, DBT, we're looking not just at what the thoughts are, but the actual process of thinking. And so the idea is maybe the content's less important, but the very fact that you're having these thoughts is really important. And so you can say, I'm having this thought, and I'm going to do this. Right? So I'm having a thought that's going to make me gain 10 pounds, and I'm going to eat it anyway, because I know it's actually not in this moment. So there's a lot of different components that go into this particular treatment program. One of the core components is diary card monitoring. So this is an example. It's very would definitely look at your pocket, probably small. But basically, you're tracking your urges and your behaviors and your feelings, and in a very logical, methodical way on a daily basis. And clients are bringing this in once a week, and you're reviewing this and using this to guide the session. So, a couple highlights from it, if you guys are familiar with standard DBT diary cards. Of course, this is focusing specifically on eating issues. And one of the targets that we have is what's called apparently irrelevant behavior. So, apparently irrelevant behavior is behavior that on the surface of it doesn't seem connected to what's going on, but it actually is. So basically, people are discounting what's going on. So, for example, if somebody tells you, gosh, I'm a Costco member because I save so much money. And then you kind of think, well, really? Are you saving money if you're buying a crate of potato chips and you eat them in 2 days? I don't know. I'm not sure that's really what that's about, right? Maybe you're not being honest with yourself. Another one might be, let's say it's Girl Scout cookies sometime. And you're like, I really want to support the Girl Scouts, so I'm going to buy 20 boxes of cookies. And you're like, okay, well, gosh, if you wanted to support the Girl Scouts, couldn't you just make a donation at any time of the year? Why do you need to be buying these cookies? Maybe you actually want to eat the cookies. So, apparently irrelevant behavior is just pulling out what's actually happening. And you just kind of have to be on the lookout for those things, and you'll start seeing them. You notice what you're doing. Capitulating is also a big one that we track. This is the screw it factor. So again, that idea, if I'm not allowed to have cupcakes and I have one bite of it, well, screw it, I'm going to eat the whole tray. Okay, so we want to track that. Notice that. And then this is the back of the diary card. So this is all the skills that we go through in this particular program. And clients are talking about this on a daily basis. as you can see with the diet card, it's very reasonable again, and so that's tapping into what we'll talk about with reasonable mind, and that's countering all the emotion activity surrounding this behavior. Another component is the binge record sheet. So this is the middle ground for this approach versus if you're familiar with classic CBT. So in standard CBT for eating disorders, people are tracking everything they're eating, every single bite of food that goes in their mouth. And for a lot of people with eating disorders, that actually might be contraindicated. It might make the problem worse since you're over-attending. And so with binge record sheets, we're just asking people to write down when they have a binge, what did you have? In a lot of detail. In fact, in so much detail that we could repeat the binge if we had just the sheet. But everything else, you don't have to write down. So that's a part of it. Also, there are skills assignments. So every session, there's going to be a homework. Typically, this is going to be delivered in a group-based program. So skills assignments would be given at group. And so there's literally handouts that people will be filling out and bringing back. Also, we do a lot of behavior change and solution analysis. When you're doing this in the group-based program, there are worksheets that you give the clients, so they're doing those on their own, at least one a week. Versus if you're familiar with individual DBT therapy, usually that's more facilitated by the therapist. So again, this is really giving the tools for the clients to use. Like I said, group is usually the format for skills training. There's also coaching calls available. So coaching calls means that clients can call or text the therapist in between sessions and get help when they need it. It's a very, very big part of DBT because it helps you generalize from what happens in the therapy room. There's only so much we can do, sitting on a couch in a chair once a week, or even if you're doing it multiple times a week. So the coaching call is available so that clients can call you when they're having urges, so you can help them then, which is when they really need to learn. So you also use it to reinforce positive behavior. So I get texts from my clients all the time with pictures of things they're doing that are positive, and then I can share with them and reinforce that. And it's also there for the moments they need it. So in the evening and over the weekend, for example. And then of course there's the forbidden foods hierarchy. So here's an example. This was from my first uncontrolled trial. And you'll see the first item there. This was small. I'm glad you guys have handouts. The first one is freshly squeezed tangelo juice. And so this is kind of a tradition now. I like to start with all of my clients doing this. And so, and we'll do a practice a bit later, actually, together today. But we start with peeling tangelos. And we don't even eat them. We just notice them with all our other senses. So what do they look like? What do they smell like? What do they smell like? What do they feel like? And then I juice them. And then we toast at the beginning of our mindfulness practice by drinking little Dixie cups of tangelo juice. So you don't even have to chew the first time that we do this. As you're reading through this, you'll see, hopefully, it's also fun to work with foods that people perhaps aren't familiar with. So very quickly we think we might know what a food is, and just, oh, I don't like that, or I like that, or no, I'm not going to eat that. The second item on here is a lychee fruit. So does everybody know what that is? No? Okay. All right. I see somebody nodding no. Now, I'll tell you, when I did this in Missouri for the first time, I had never seen a lychee fruit, and nobody else had. But my co-leader brought in lychees, and they look like little eyeballs, actually. And so they can trigger a very strong disgust reaction if you're disgust sensitive. But if you bite into them, I think they're lovely. They're so sweet and delicious, and I love them. So it's kind of fun to work with something that is a bit out of the box to start with, and really work on beginner's mind. Let's be curious about this, and not just dismiss food because of how it is. Also, you'll see, for example, we worked with popcorn. So with this, you're presenting, for example, food basically how you would see it in real life. So with popcorn, literally giving your client a bag of microwave popcorn, for example, and then they have to interact with it and feel the greasy side of the bag and hear it rustling and all that. Because if somebody's going to be binging on popcorn at home, that's probably what they're going to be experiencing. You also want to give folks choice. So, for example, I have the buttered versus kettle corn. And so people can choose, and that's part of the mindfulness process. What makes me choose this? So, for example, I'm just curious, as we're going through the line and picking lunch today, what made you guys choose what you got? Taste?
But I don't eat.
Okay. So based on your experience in the past, you had a thought, oh, I know what this is. I like this better. I like that better. Cool. What else? What else makes people decide what they ate today? Perfect, yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the things we talk about is this idea of cellular hunger. It's like, what's that about? What made you crave that? Maybe you need more protein today. I recently went camping and I brought all these granola bars and fruit and stuff, but all I was craving was protein. Probably because it was hiking so much. So it's interesting to pay attention to why we eat what we eat. So, and you'll see too, it goes again from less threatening foods to more intense ones. So usually we're ending with desserts, candy. We usually eat cake at the last session and celebratory experience. So this is another example. This is from my uncontrolled trial. You'll see here we started adding in meals. So at this point in the program, usually we'll be doing about a month of meals together. So we'll have pasta night, we'll have pizza night. And when we do this, my stance is, unless you have a truly life-threatening situation, disorder, that if you eat a bite of this, it's going to be a medical emergency. And I ask people to eat a bite of everything that's presented. So, and there's just another example. Also, when we're doing this in the group setting, we have a break in between the first part of the group and the second, and I have snacks in the break. Those are optional, so you can eat them or not eat them, but it gives you the chance to interact with the food in a natural setting. Also practice, like at lunch today, right? Do you talk while you're eating? What's that about? Why are you talking now? What's going on inside of you? And how do you do that while you're also eating? So to go a little more then into specific DBT skills for mindfulness that we use in this program, we start with teaching about these different states of mind. So emotion mind, reasonable mind, and wise mind. Emotion mind is when emotion is in control. Reasonable mind is when we're logical. When we're in emotion mind, we're very much focused on the short-term benefits of what we're doing, because that's our fight or flight mode. So we're just concerned about survival and what we want to do then, or we're concerned about being bored. Reasonable mind is bringing in our long-term goals. What do we want to be working towards? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? So both of these states of mind are important, but when they get extreme, they can be problematic in either direction. Wise mind then is the integration of the two, and it's coming back to what do I really want in my values, in my core. And so you'll usually see that most problematic eating is happening emotionally. And so the dance is to bring in reasonable mind is to get you closer to wise mind. So you'll notice that a lot of the materials we use in DBT are very structured, very logical, very reasonable. And that's part of what that's doing. You know, if you're filling out the diary card, it's actually helping you access reason. The what and how skills then are what you do when you're mindful, and the how skills are how you do it. So, of course, with mindful eating, we're applying these skills to eating. So with observing, we're just noticing. And we're bringing in a beginner's mind. So, again, coming back to the example, okay, well, we've had this food catered before, so I know when That's a thought, right? We don't know. What if there was different cooking today that really jazzed something up and tasted different, right? I was just talking about this with a mom listening in group, and she was saying that she was struggling. She cooked chocolate chip cookies. She baked them, and she said, I've had chocolate chip cookies millions of times. I already know what they are, so I don't need to eat more. And I said, well, really? Because I think every chocolate chip cookie is different. There's no one chocolate chip cookie that's going to be the same as the one before, right? There's going to be different placement of the chips, different number of chips. Each new chocolate chip cookie is a new experience. And so that's kind of the spirit of it. We want to approach food as if it's a completely new experience every time we see it. And let our preconceptions be in the past. And then when we're describing, again, we're describing not just the food, but also what's happening inside. And with participating, we are being fully present and letting go of self-consciousness, letting go of any emotions that might interfere. So, with this, just a note. By definition, you can be binging and participating. Because usually what happens when you're binging is you're zoned out and you're not really present, right? So you have to be fully there and you have to be aware of the big picture, not just what's precisely in front of you, if that makes sense. So then looking at the house skills with non-judgmental stance, again, we're letting go of any judgment. So a judgment is anytime you're evaluating, anytime you're putting a shorthand on something. So some common ones are good, bad, this food is good, this is bad, this is healthy, this is unhealthy. Body image, we might say this is ugly or pretty, fat, skinny. Those are all judgments. I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that, those are all judgments. So we want to let them go. And then with one mindfully, we are just doing one thing at a time. Again, there's the idea of internal and external. So if you are eating, just eat. If you are worrying, just worry. Literally sit down and worry. That's a treatment for generalized anxiety, is to set aside 30 minutes a day to simply worry. It's interesting what happens with that. You might find you run out of worries, actually. But if you're worrying and eating, you're not being one mindful. So think about this too, perhaps, when you're in the shower. Do you ever, you're in there and you're thinking about your day or what happened yesterday. You don't even know if you washed your hair. Like there's a moment you're like, oh wait, did I wash my hair? Well, you're probably not being one mindful. So when you're in your shower, just shower. Thinking about all this. And then finally, with effectiveness, we're playing by the rules. We're doing what works. So with eating, we now have decades and decades of research that shows that restriction does not work. It doesn't. There's tons of diets out there. The diet industry is multi-million-dollar industry, not a billion-dollar industry. If these things worked, why would there be so many different ones out there? And if you look at things over time, everything changes. I remember when I was growing up, what you were supposed to be eating was carbohydrates, right? There were low-fat diets, fat-free diets. So that was healthy. Now, my goodness, carbs are like the devil. You shouldn't be eating them at all. So just give it time. Things are probably going to change. So, but what we do know is that throughout all of this, we see that restriction backfiring. And so if you want to be effective and you actually want to eat in a balanced way, then to be effective, you need to stop restricting. This is paradox, actually. By being open to all foods, you'll probably reach your goal, which would be to eat in a balanced way. So we have to figure out what our objective is and then how to be effective with that situation. Also with this, of course, is metabolism, right? If you are restricting, usually what happens is your metabolism will change. And so it makes it harder and harder to lose weight. And so if your goal is to be a certain weight, then dieting actually doesn't help you. The only thing that's going to help you long term is to eat in a balanced way. And so this is really challenging lots of thoughts and things that people forget. But that's the spirit of it. So then we also look at multiple different hungers. So there are many, many reasons why we eat. And it's not always just about, and usually not about, what's going on inside our stomach. So eye hunger is when you see food and then suddenly you want to eat it. Whereas before, you probably weren't even thinking about that. So today, when I saw the cupcakes, I was like, oh, those look delicious. And then I wanted to eat one because they were so pretty. But perhaps I could have just looked at it. You know, maybe. Do you guys ever go out to a restaurant and then the dessert case is just so inviting and like, oh, I gotta get one of those. The same thing. Nose hunger is when you smell something and you want to eat it. So I went to a movie a few weeks ago and I walked in, the smell of popcorn just floated over me. I was like, oh, I gotta get some, right? That was nose hunger. I wasn't necessarily hungry or didn't necessarily want popcorn, but it smelled good, so I wanted to eat it. And by the way, this is not judging these motivations. We eat for all sorts of reasons, and food is a wonderful thing. So if we mindfully choose to do this and know why we're doing this, then that's great. We don't have to just eat cellularly for stomach hunger. With mouth hunger, we're thinking about what does our mouth want? Sometimes we want to be eating crunchy foods. I notice when I'm angry, I'll find myself wanting to eat like pretzels or chips or something and really chomp on it. But if I'm sad, I might want to eat something really soothing where I don't even have to chew, like pudding or ice cream, right? And so we have to keep our mouth hungry, keep our mouth happy. And then stomach hunger is when our stomach's actually empty and it's growling and it needs food. Now, this is a difference from my understanding of intuitive eating or other mindful eating approaches where the idea is you're only supposed to eat when you're physically hungry. This is not teaching that. This is saying, just think about what's motivating you to eat. Do you want to eat this one? Or do you want to eat it? And part of the reason that we don't want to just eat when we're physically hungry is, first of all, it's hard to know. Very quickly we lose touch with our internal cues, and we may not know if we're hungry. And so if we only base it on when we're physically hungry, we might not be eating when we need to eat. So cellular hunger then is, like I was talking about earlier, when we had the example of, oh, I wanted to eat protein, right? So what's that about? Did you need more protein today? So our body tells us what we need if we listen closely. And then mind hunger is where most of us operate all the time. So that's basing what we eat on what's going on in our mind. So I noticed this today. We had lunch at 11:30, and I had the thought, 11:30? That's still like breakfast time, brunch time. Why are we eating lunch already? But I was affected and then I ate because I had to eat and do this talk, right? And mind hunger can also be about, well, it is lunchtime, so I should eat even though I'm not hungry. So with dialectics, it's that balance. I do ask people to eat at least 3 meals a day, even if you're not hungry, because we still need to be feeding our organs, we need to be taking in nutrients, even if we don't think we're. And then heart hunger is where most of us operate. So heart hunger is about how are you feeling and what you need to address with that. So a lot of times we'll be eating because we're sad, or we're anxious, or we're bored. And that's okay, perhaps, if you're doing it mindfully. And ultimately, you need to be addressing what is that emotion telling you and where is it coming from. Right. So if you are sad because you've gone through a breakup, you've just lost a relationship, and you want to eat a piece of cake, well then have at it, eat it mindfully. But ultimately, there's not enough cake in the world that's going to feed that sadness. You have to get out there and have new connection and let go of this relationship you lost. And so that's kind of the balance. We also want to be looking at clear versus cloudy emotions. So clear emotions are proportionate to the situation and they fit the facts of the situation. Most of the time we're having cloudy emotions, which are influenced by all sorts of things, including our past and history, so not just what's happening in this moment, but what happened all of the other time in the past, similar to this moment, and worries about the future. Also, it's influenced by our self-care. So a good example of this is when you're traveling. Let's say you have to take a 6 a.m. flight. So you get up in the dead of night, it's 4 a.m., you got about 3 hours of sleep maybe. You're just starting to drink your coffee, or maybe you have more coffee in you because you're tired. Just kind of eating on the run. You haven't got your morning workout in. And maybe you have a bit of a headache as well. Right? If something happens that's stressful, you're probably going to react more intensely than you would otherwise, or you're going to be numbed out. So cloudy emotions are either extreme versus just responding kind of in proportion to what's happening, if that makes sense. So, right, you go to the airport and maybe you're asked to check your carry-on bag, and if you're having a cloudy emotion, you might get very, very upset. No, I need that bag. It'll fit. There's the classic SNL skit. Oh, it'll fit. The guy has a big bag. It's gonna fit. But if you weren't vulnerable, it may not be a big deal, right? You're just like, oh, okay, fine, take my bag. So we want to notice when we're having cloudy emotions and they're more intense, and then do what we can to address them. And only act on the clear part of the emotion. So I'm mindful of the time. So I will just briefly brush through these. But this is just listing out the distress tolerance skills that we go through. A lot of them, of course, are going to be similar to standard DBT, but we're applying them to mindful reading. Some ones to highlight would be alternate rebellion. I love this skill. And specific to DBT for eating disorders, also DBT for substance abuse. Has anyone heard of it? Okay. So the idea with it is that it's completely normal to want to rebel. It's a normal human feeling. But the problem is, usually we rebel in ways that hurt us. We end up shooting ourselves in the foot. Or they hurt other people. So alternate rebellion is doing things that feel rebellious, but they don't hurt anybody and they don't hurt ourselves. And a lot of people won't even know you're doing them when you're doing them. And especially if you're very perfectionistic, you have a lot of expectations for yourself, if you challenge that just even a little bit, you feel like you're being crazy. Control. So this relates to eating disorders because a lot of times that might be part of what's going on. People might be eating or not eating in certain ways as a way of protesting or rebelling or getting a sense of control. So we want to find other ways to get that feeling that aren't going to hurt us more. So last night, for example, in my family group, we did temporary tattoos. So it's always fun. And somebody was saying, actually nowadays, maybe that's becoming the norm is to have tattoos. So alternate rebellion is like no tattoos. So, yeah. So that's kind of the spirit of it. Distress tolerance then, lots of different ideas there. With activities, I would say you want to be picking activities that are not compatible with what you are trying not to do. So let's say you have an urge to binge, and you think, okay, I'm going to use my skills, I'm going to watch TV. That probably wouldn't work, right? Because then your hands are still available, and it's very easy to just keep shutting open. So instead, perhaps maybe you get some lotion, and you cover your hands in excessive amounts of lotion, and then you sit there and you rub it in until like a half hour goes by. Because when you're covered in lotion, you can't really binge. Full spoon. You also want to be thinking about activities that bring joy and happiness and fun and build mastery. So again, that idea of having a sense of control. Very, very important. Also, I would highlight opposite emotions. So opposite emotion action is huge. This is basically what we're doing with the forbidden foods hierarchy. Right, so if we think, oh, we shouldn't eat that, we should avoid that, I say, well, that's exactly what we're going to eat. So we're going opposite to how we're feeling because our emotions are tricking us and telling us things that are not helpful. So we have to challenge that. I think I will let you guys look up and Google most of the rest of them, but the last comment I'll make then is earning bridges. This is how we end once we've gone through a hierarchy with a group. We end with this imagery of earning bridges. So we pick something something that we're able to leave in the past, we're willing to leave in the past. And then I walk folks through sitting it on an island and literally burning the bridge to that island so you can't go back, you can't walk back to the bridge. It's actually a really powerful, nice way to end the experience. So, to tell you just a little bit about the research support for this, I'm going to walk through, this is from my first uncontrolled trial. And this is looking at the binges that people were reporting. So on the left side there we have a number of binges, and then on the bottom it's the diary card data. So every week what people were reporting for the binges. And as you can see, it significantly decreased, and it was a very large effect size. These are the results from the EDI bulimia subscale. And so the different points are after each module. So there was pre-treatment, and then after the mindfulness module that we go through, also after emotion regulation, and after the stress tolerance. Again, statistically significant, large effect size decrease. And then drive for thinness, also large effect size. It wasn't significant though. And interoceptive awareness. So again, that's the idea of how well can you detect what's going on inside, and how well can you distinguish? Do I know it's an emotion or actual physical? And in this case, the way the measure is scored, higher scores mean better interoceptive awareness. Am I saying that right? Basically, going down is better. Yes, so higher scores mean worse interoceptive awareness. So you'll see here that, again, it was a large effect size and it's statistically significantly decreased. So basically, interoceptive awareness got better. And then these are the results from my randomized trial. In this, we separated out group-based treatment versus just the diary card component alone. And with the diary card, folks checked in with a beginning therapist in training. She was just starting her master's, and so literally for about 15-20 minutes, once a week, clients would come in and give her the diary card. She would just generally go through it, and then that would be it. So it was interesting because what we found was actually the diary card was very powerful. And so I think that really backs up, if you know any DBT therapists, if you are one, a lot of times we spend so much time talking about the diary card, and people might wonder, why do you care so much about this piece of paper? And the reason in part is because it actually is a very powerful tool. So just doing the diary card alone is very helpful. So all that to say, we saw statistically significant decreases in binging with the group-based program. In fact, it went down to, by the end, people were not binging at all. And this is with women who have been binging for decades. So it was pretty exciting. And we also saw a large decrease for the diary code only, but that was not statistically significant. And as you can see, it was a bit more of a rock and road. These are the results for the EDI bulimia and again, interoceptive awareness. So interestingly, for both conditions, it was statistically significant and large effect sizes. These are both for drive for thinness and believing automatic thoughts. Drive for thinness also statistically significantly went down, and large to medium effect sizes, so large for group-based DBT and medium for diary card. And then bulimic automatic thoughts is only statistically significant for group-based DBT